We are looking at the November 2020 IT practical exam, or the paper 1 for grade 11. This was an exemplar that was released by the Department of Education for the Eastern Cape, a whole bunch of other exemplars. So we are dealing with the final question, question 4. If you've gone through the first 3 questions, then you should know by now, in the wise words of Dr. Strange, we are in the end game now. We're in the last question. This is the part of the exam where you are running out of time and you're stressed and you need to try to finish. And the invigilator said there's only like so many minutes left and you're trying to finish it. So the key to this question is to make sure that whether it's difficult or not, try to get the marks, as many marks as you can. Try to hit the marks, do the inputs, do the outputs, get the marks. So let's have a look at it. So we've got our program. There is write the code to do the following. It looks like it's only one button. So I've got the program open over here. It looks like it's only one button. So there we go. We've got a whole bunch of check boxes over here and some inputs over there. So let's have a look at what they want me to do. First of all, they actually give me the algorithm of what I must do. Get the name and the age from the input controls named EDT name and SED age. So that's a spin edit. So we need the name and the age. So S name of type string, and the age I assume we can make as a number, an integer, because it's coming from a spin edit. So the name we are going to get from EDT name.text, and the age we're going to get from the spin edit age. What property? The value property. And you remember that's an integer, so therefore we don't need to convert. String to string, integer to integer, no conversions are needed. That's what I like about those components. So let's move on. If the age of the person is greater than or equal to 60, okay, let's just type that in straight away. If the age is greater than equal to 60, because we got the age just above there. If that's true, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? Then a string variable must consist of the following. Then a string variable. So we must make a string variable with this. That your test is on, and then whatever the system date is. Okay. So example of a compiled string. So we must make a string with your test is. So they want me to make a string. I'm going to call it sMessage. I don't know what we want, what it's for. So let's say sMessage is equal to your test. Your test is on. It's quite bad that you get told that your test is on today. Join to the system date. Now, how do I get today's date? Well, there is a date function in Delphi which will give me today's date. But the problem with the date function is that it is of type tDate, and this is a string, so I need to convert it from a date to a string, and we put in today's date. So there we go. So you can just use date as it is, and that will give you today's date, whatever the computer's date is for that day. So that's the system date. Okay. There we go. You got a date. Even if you're single, you can have a date. Fantastic. If the person is less than 60, okay, so this is the else part. So if they're less than 60, so else, what do we want to do? Then the test is on the system date plus 1. Okay, so that's quite easy. It's exactly the same as this, basically. The difference is we want to add 1 to the date. Now, if you add a number onto a date, it adds that many days to that date. So whatever the date is, it'll add 1 onto it. So if they asked to add a month on you, then you would add like 30, or if they asked you to add a week, you would add 7, something like those types. So whatever integer number you add onto a date will take that many days on top of it. If you minus an integer number, it'll subtract, it'll go back that many days. So those are your date functions. Okay, so we've done those 2 parts. Example, so there we go. Fantastic. So that'll be the next. Obviously, our dates won't be like this because I haven't done this in November 2020. I've done this in 2021. If the checkbox, okay, so now we're going to another little thing. So I'm assuming that's done. Fantastic. Let's move on. Now we're going to go to the checkboxes. If the checkbox checks symptoms, you'll look over here. There's actually 3 checkboxes. There is symptoms, there is travel, and contact. If symptoms is checked and one of the other is checked, so either that one or that one is checked, then display the patient's name and date to be tested on 2 separate lines on the label called LBL display. Okay, so let's first do this part. Okay, let's try. If the checkbox for symptoms is checked, so we know that it must be checked. So if the checkbox for symptoms is a checkbox, CHK symptoms dot checked, We don't even have to say equals true. If that is checked, you could say equals true, but if you leave that out, it assumes that it's true. If that is true, and at the same time, one of those is true. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, so watch carefully. So you might be tempted to say if travel.checked or shk contact.checked. You might be tempted to do something like that. Okay, you could. It's exactly the same as if I said equals true, equals true, equals true. It's the exact same code. It works the same way. The problem with this is the and actually happens first. So it actually combines these two with brackets almost. It checks that these two must be true, or if they check that, just that, and they didn't check symptoms, this whole thing will be true because it's either this must be true or this must be true, which is not what we want. We want this to be true and one of these. So if that's the case, we actually need to put brackets around these. And is always done before or. So in this case, we actually want the or to be done first. So that's why we're putting brackets around them first. So if that is true, so that means, there we go. Then display the patient's name and date to be tested on two separate lines in the label. So LBL display dot caption must be their name. So we got their name from their S name. It must be on two separate lines. So let me just go down and see. So their name and surname must be, so name, and then underneath it must be two separate lines. So we're going to use a #13 plus a #13 plus the message for when they must go and get their test. So there we go. That's the test that's over there. That's why they wanted me to put it in a string. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So then must be displayed on two separate lines in the label. Else, if it's not that, then say phone your doctor if you are worried. Else. So if it's not safe, else. Then we need to say, hey, the LBL display, that caption must be equal to phone your doctor if you are worried. Okay, so basically, if this is not checked, then it'll display that. If this is checked, but both of those are not checked, then it'll display this. But if this is checked and one of them, then it'll display the name and the message. Okay, that seems to make sense. Okay, so they give me some examples, and is that it? That was quite easy. That was a bit too easy. Okay, well, let's see if it runs. Let's test it out with this information. I will be honest, that did seem very easy for a last question. Well, if you get a question like this in the exam at the end, then you take it. But just take it step by step. I think maybe the only tricky part was maybe the date to string part, or the date. So let's have a look. So there's my program, and we're going to write in John Doe and see if we get the same result. Not John Doe, it's John Doe. And you are 65, John Doe, and you just have a fever. And if I click on this, phone your doctor if you are worried. Because they didn't have one of those. So that seems to be correct. Now I come over here. He's still with John Doe, but now he's got a fever and he's got direct contact with someone. So if I click on that, it says, John Doe, your date is on today. I'm doing this on the 1st of November. So that is correct. It is today's date. Obviously, it won't be that day because that's the date of the test or the exam. So that is correct because it's today's date. However, if I make John Doe 18, like I'm doing there, that means it must be the 2nd of November. If I click, let's just double check if that's what they want. So they selected those two. So let's click that, click that. So it's still that one plus one of those two. Yes, it's the day after. Okay, so there we go. It seems to be working. So we should change it to Jane Doe. But it's fine. Okay, so there we go. Different names. Does that make sense? So if is that the whole question? That looks like it was the whole question. It was 20 marks. It's done. So it looks like it's done. My overall impression of this paper is that it's quite easy. The only challenging parts were maybe the encryption question in question 1. Maybe the text file combined with the array was challenging. But overall, this paper was quite easy. And if you can do this, then you should easily be able to do all these questions. The regular algorithms they always ask, like sort and inserting into a text file, reading from a text file. The database algorithms, they asked all of them, the insert, the delete, the update, and going through each and every record. So make sure you know your algorithms, and then you should be fine. Otherwise, I think this paper was quite easy. Hope you found it too. If you're looking for more help, go to our YouTube channel, go to the playlist section, and you can see all the topics that are available for you to help revise. Leave a like, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, don't do it the long way. Do it the Mr. Long way.